Hi, I'm Kate Dykes, Director here at the Middletown Arts Center. It's my great pleasure to bring you this special feature with artist Kevin Muente. In this artist talk, Kevin explores his largest collection of oil paintings, works spanning over a 20-year period, in his exhibit, Beneath the Gathering Sky here at the MAC. I warmly welcome you to visit our galleries through April 23rd. This exhibit is brought to you with the support of the Miriam Knoll Foundation.
Hello, my name is Andrew Knoll and I teach at Miami University Middletown. We are at the Middletown Art Center, and with us we have Kevin Muente.
Thanks, Andy. I hope that you guys can come out here and see Beneath the Gathering Sky, an exhibition of my 48 paintings. It's going to be on view here at the Middletown Art Center till April 23rd. I hope you come, and I hope that you enjoy your experience.
So, I'll kind of lead in with talking about process. So, people have had questions whether you are you working on site? Are you photographing stuff? Are you manipulating? How does it end up from beginning to final painting?
Well, Andy, I have a bunch of different ways I work, and one way I work in terms of this painting here, when I was doing the artist residency, often I paint from life, and I do small studies, and that's mostly for my landscape stuff. So this was in grizzly bear country. You don't see all the grizzly bear poop around here, but while I was painting, I was kind of worried,
like knee deep in grizzly bear.
Not knee deep, but enough to kind of keep me on my toes. And I'm wondering what would happen if a grizzly bear came out of here. What would I do? And I'd probably be like, adios. I'll just kind of leave my painting stuff here. So anyway, I was doing small studies, and there's a few of Alaskan paintings that I have small studies. I really like that, being in tune with the space and the time. And then in the studio, when I was back at home, I worked from my sketches and from my photo references for these more detailed paintings.
Okay. So, and where's this particular one?
This is Denali National Park, and I did an artist residency there, so all the ones on this wall are from Alaska, and one is from McCarthy, Alaska, but the other ones are from Denali. And if you ever do any research about the National Park Denali, becoming Denali, there was a famous biologist, Adolf Murray, and you stay in his cabin when you do the residency, and he studied wolves and he studied the bighorn sheep. So it's pretty cool to read the books, and you're like, oh, his wife was shooing a grizzly bear cub out of this cabin with her broom. Right. And so it's totally in the heart of the wilderness. And so people would ask, did you see grizzly bear? And it was like, yeah, we saw him every day. And luckily, never where it was any type of really scary situation, but this is like extreme painting when you're on the food chain and you're painting.
Yeah. So this particular painting, so was this completed in the studio after from those small studies and sketches? And, okay.
And so then we could talk about some of the figurative stuff, which is kind of a totally different process. If you'd like.
Sure. I've done a lot of landscape painting. Well, another thing too is how long is this process per painting? How long does it take you to go from drawing and sketch? And we'll get to figurative, but how long is that process?
Well, that's a good question. It always varies, and sometimes when I'm working on a big painting like this, I like to go outside and just do studies that aren't really involved with the figure, so I can get something done in a couple of hours. Because something like this, I lose track of time. It takes a few months, maybe 3 to 4 months in the summer or something. I don't actually want to know, because
if you add up the hours, it becomes a bit.
Yeah, there's a painting in the back that we can look at later on. It's 4 feet by 8 feet, And at the time, because people always ask me, like, how long does it take to make a painting? I was working out these little grids, and it was taking me about an hour to do a 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 inch. And I'm not going to do the math because it's just like, it's horrible. Like,
so if you're working on something this scale, do you have this going on and then I mean, are you focused on one thing at a time, or do you have like I'll work on 10 things at a time and then they might reach completion at different points in time? Is that similar? Or?
I try to do like one thing at a time, but sometimes after a while, it's like I need a little bit of a release. But
you need like something immediate or something.
Yeah. Like I haven't finished a painting in months,
right,
and
right.
so I can talk a little bit about the process for this.
Sure.
And in this case here, I'm always thinking about different people for different paintings. And I was at one of my former students' weddings, and I was sitting at a table, and he's kind of one of my former students, and he's like, I would love to be in one of your paintings. And I'm like, all right, you want him out? Okay, you can be in my painting. And then I asked him, like, well, what do you like to do? And he was working on a farm. He was sort of the manager of the farm, and he was really proud of his wood pile. So one morning I followed him around. I took lots of photos. So most of the time my process it's usually 200 to 300 reference photos. And I came up with this one here, and I was like, what is he looking at that wood pile? Like, it just didn't quite have enough of a spark. And instantly I was like, I'm gonna light his wood pile on fire. And so we then are really kind of drawn into the narrative. And so almost this whole entire image that you're seeing is directly from my photo reference. And I will grid my photo, and then I grid my canvas so that it's the same aspect ratio. And then I can like find out like, oh, on my photograph, his hand is like in this particular location. Yeah. So that helps me because there's so much stuff that if I don't have that, I get lost pretty quickly. And then I just looked up some fire on Google, and then I'm just kind of like, oh, I can make fire.
Yeah. So, and like, not to jump off of the process a little bit, but like talking about that narrative, like one of the questions that I have is like, there's, you know, in a lot of these paintings, like a sense of like, and I brought this up in the questions, was like stoicism, or you know, like he seems like his initial response to this was like, what is he looking at? And then it's like, you know, putting in the fire, but there's almost like is he okay with this situation? Is he not okay with this situation? You know what I mean? So, do you want to talk a little bit about that, or like the relationship these figures have?
Yeah.
Or what you want the figures to evoke in these landscapes.
Okay. So I do like my figures that have a stoicism, as you talked about. If we go through the exhibition, there's only one painting that I would say I would stamp that person as a villain. And the guy's actually a really good guy. But he came out to the photo shoot, he had 2 changes of clothes, and he's like, I want to go gangster on this. So he looks like he's some sort of like mob boss, and we can talk about that later. But with this particular painting, I'm thinking about trying to create a story, but not give the viewer everything. We kind of wonder, did he start the fire? Did he come across the fire? What is he thinking about? And we'll never know. And I think that keeps us with the painting.
Yeah. So that was one thing that I noticed in like, you know, like looking through these and thinking about these relationships of the figure to these environments, is that stoicism in that sense of like, it's suspended tension that's never resolved, and it keeps you engaged. Like, you are trying to figure out that it's like a narrative that it begs another question. So, yeah, I think that's fantastic.
It's actually that's such a great thing that you're pointing out, Andy, because in terms of painting, I feel that there's a total disadvantage to narrative because you have a frozen image.
Right.
If you're watching a movie or a TV show, you're going to find out what's going to happen.
That's right.
And
this is, you get one frame, right? You've got a movie and it's like, you have to choose one frame that sets up that, the whole arc of the story without like just spelling it out for people. So,
yeah. So it's frozen in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is one of the paintings that you referenced a little bit earlier about like one character that you might characterize as a villain. Would you like to talk about this particular painting?
Yeah. You can see all of the different smoke behind him, and then you see this total clear cut that's happened, and he looks to be wearing a business suit, and he has this sort of fedora. He looks like he's kind of mean, almost like a gangster. And in some ways, this talks a little bit about maybe capitalism running rampant and going completely out of control. There's many places in my area of the world, and I'm sure in everyone else's area of the world, where things are being chopped down, and then they build these box buildings, and it's like, it looks just like any other company. And so when I was here, it was like, I would call it devastation porn, in that I'm always looking for these clear-cut things which kill me. I hate it. But at the same time, it really, when there's all this element of destruction, there's this sense of like, I want to paint it because it's really, it's a pivotal moment in a story.
It's a gut punch, or it's a visceral response to the environment that you're in. Yeah.
So he's turned, and it's almost like he's like, "What are you going to do about it?" What are we going to do about it? That's something that we have to think about.
Right. Very good. So this is another question that I had brought up earlier. Is like some of the figures, like the one with the fire and the axe. The figure is away from us, so we're kind of like a candid or a voyeur in the situation. Like we're coming upon this and finding the figure in the situation. Certain ones of these where it's like, I don't know if this one does it as much as others, but like where it actually breaks that fourth wall, like in television where you talk to the viewer. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, about like how you see those characters and like, like I don't know if we can talk about this, but like, so the contrast between these two, like this one is more of like we're catching this person in a moment and they may not know that we're there. But this person is kind of defiantly reacting to us. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the interaction with the figures, like how you see that?
And breaking down the fourth wall?
Yeah.
We can go to some other paintings. I think we can talk about those there too.
Okay.
So you're talking about the fourth wall. In this particular painting, we have two of the people in the painting looking out, and then one directly confronting us. And I think when I'm making paintings, especially with multiple figures, and sometimes with a single figure, I love how the person in the painting can have this direct relationship with the viewer. Sometimes it might be akin to when you're at the theater and someone is acting, and for a brief moment they engage you. Maybe not necessarily in sort of like the Ferris Bueller fourth wall, but like you see this really direct connection, and they're talking to your soul.
It's usually like line of eyesight, right? It's like that psychic connection between,
And in a way, once that happens, I think that takes the space of the painting and throws it out into the real world where the viewer's actually looking at it. I think that's a really incredible experience to have. And there's a painting by Giuseppe Ribera. It's in the Prado, and I believe it's either the flaying of Saint Bartholomew or Saint Philip. It changed when I was in graduate or when I was in school, so I'm never sure what it's titled. But there's all of these guys that are about to flay a human being. And when you look deeper into the painting, there is a mother holding a baby, and she is looking directly out at you. And you're like, am I part of this scene now as
It makes
well?
you complicit, or
yes,
or yeah, like you have to do a value judgment on yourself as well. Yeah. So and that brings me to another question that I had about like a sense of scale. So another thing is like like you have different scales, but like this one is a larger scale. So whenever we do have that projection outward, the scale kind of like more envelops. You want to talk a little bit about that, like how you choose your sense of scale for
But scale is a great question to talk about, and I would love to say that I'm always thinking about scale, but sometimes I'm thinking about scale in like, oh, I have a small little painting laying around, I'm going to use it for
or
this.
have X amount of time to execute this, or
Yes.
just very practical concerns.
Yeah, and then there's a painting in the exhibition that I did of my wife after she rescued this little baby bird that we ended up raising until it became full grown and then flew away. But anyway, it's this, I don't want to call it an ancient frame, but it's at least 100 years old, and I bought it at some auction or some sale, and then I was like, eventually, I need to make a painting for
You're
that.
going to make one specifically for that.
And then I like to paint this scale, and I would love to even paint bigger, but then it becomes, there's issues about how to transport it, and some people are always considering like, well, how do you market selling figure paintings? And I'm really lucky in that I teach at Northern Kentucky University, and I have sold a lot of my figurative paintings, but you can see that I haven't sold all of them. And so like, where do you put a big painting? And then do people want big paintings of people they don't know in their house looking at them?
Yeah. So it's like, that is one thing that I think a lot of people miss is like this, there's this romantic idea of like artists and, but like the artist has to deal with very real concerns about like, where do I store these things? How much time do I have to do this, So it's like, I also like teaching. It's like, teaching can allow you to like maybe follow conceptual concerns that you're not as much concerned about like, like selling 50 of these, but you're concerned about like the ideas behind it.
And every time I think like going big in scale, and I'm dealing with this right now, and it's a smaller painting than this, but when it comes to this stuff, I'm always asking myself, why am I painting it so big? Because the smaller ones, I think they go a little bit faster, but often, and I hope this is the case, but the small paintings might take me as long as the big paintings. I don't know, but it seems like it's easier to handle all the minutia on a small scale as opposed to when it's so big.
I kind of describe it to students as like it's if you've got an orchestra versus a band. You know what I mean? It's like getting all the parts of an orchestra together. It's a larger scale. It takes a little bit more wrangling than it does to like a four-piece band. I'm really interested. It's really sophisticated how you're using like your foreground. Your foreground focal points are low contrast, and then you have this really intense background. Like I mentioned, like Caspar David Friedrich, as far as like even though they're the focal point, it's like they're low contrast. It creates this intensity between them and the background space. Do you want to talk about some of your influences or choice of lighting?
Yeah. One of the things, and I do work from life quite a bit, and there's this whole bunch of painters that it's like, you have to work from life. And that doesn't work for me that often. One, because I often like to have my figures backlit and almost from a worm's eye view. So it really kind of makes these figures bigger. And sometimes that obviously these figures are kind of cool and dark, and then the sun is going down here. When I'm thinking about influences, there's a painting, I've done several paintings of my dog and I like this, and there's a painting by Knoll that inspired Van Gogh. It's called The Sower, and the man is sort of sowing seeds in a field. It's this like specific time of day. I think that's one of the things that I've taken from landscape painting and applied it to my figurative work. And so I'm always taking off my shirt and holding my dog and doing these like dramatic poses with a little bit of a tweak to them. So that's a specific influence in terms of this particular painting, and then other ones that are kind of derived off of this. And it's a family portrait. This is right after we got the cat. She's still a kitten. Our dog, she was getting older. And I thought this would be kind of a dynamic way to do a family portrait. I'll show you a low light situation.
Yeah, do you want to move
yeah.
it right here? I'll move over here. Yeah, so this one is completely like low key, you know.
So this is a low key painting. A painter that's inspired a lot of work. Actually, anytime I do a painting, I'm always like referencing other artists that have done things like this. So Frederick Remington, the Wild West painter, has a bunch of paintings he's doing in low light. And also a contemporary painter named Vincent Desiderio. And then Bo Bartlett might not do some paintings in the dark, but he's got a bunch of boat things, and Homer. Winslow Homer. So all of these artists are really kind of influential. And with this low light painting, my dog had several eye surgeries, and she wasn't up to sitting in the front of the boat. So my brother's dog looks just like Lassie. His name is Harley. He would just stay super focused. So I did several photos with Harley, and then several photos with me, and then we were able to, I kind of combined the two in Photoshop. And I'm going to mess this up, it's like an indirect ophthalmoscope, and the vet who was working on our dog let me do this photo shoot with this thing in his vet office. But anyway, the photo shoot that I did was done in the middle of the day.
Okay,
so I invented dark.
That's what I was wondering, is like if you actually like are working from, you know, references that are in this flavor, like you are changing it.
Yeah. So in Photoshop, I just brought all the light down, and so I feel it's a convincing sort of nightscape.
Yeah. One thing like you know, like teaching students, it's like I just have to say, like, whenever I see like this type of or painting like this, it shows incredible restraint, because like you know that ability of paint to like put the highlight on something to really make it, you know, it's like to keep this all on the low key, it's restraint. Yeah. Like that shows.
Yeah, and then here's like this is my dad's.
I know, right?
My dad's parka, and they have these like orange insides that are super bright, and it's like it wasn't that bright, but then
you have to do that.
Like I'm trying to be really subtle, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, I gotta paint that orange. So yeah, and there's a painting, The Lady of Shalott by Waterhouse, and the boat is going like opposite way, and there's so much detail because it's like maybe it's, I don't know what time. It's just a really beautiful light, and there's so much detail. It's like at night you can't see that stuff, so you gotta sort of really kind of make things subtle. But there's some weeds in that painting, and like, you know.
But it's like it's that cumulative thing that it's like it has to. But again, it's like I think that shows incredible restraint to say I'm going to do this, and you know, it's like I think it's like, you know, you look at like all this paint, like this is years of work, right? Like like you realize like I can take this one and I can, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be everything. It has to be this particular piece of something.
And it's like, I think as a painter, I'm also a photographer. I really get excited when I have a photo shoot with my models, and I'm like, yeah, work it, you know, whatever. And I'm always telling them to go and make over dramatic poses, because if they're just doing regular gestures, it doesn't translate well. It looks very, very dull.
Yeah.
And then I don't have a whole tech company to do all this sort of all those special effects. Like this boat was in my parents' backyard on the I don't know what, the dolly or whatever for the, and so like I've invented water, I've invented darkness, but it's like you get to make your own world.
Right.
And I think in a very low-tech way, as a director, as a creative person, it feels good when you've like made something that people are like, oh, this looks so real, and it's like, it's totally fictitious,
Right,
it's
right.
totally invented.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about like, so yeah, so you were talking earlier about like kind of being a director, and you know, like we have these figures that repeat through. As you're setting this up, and you're the director, like, are you doing this? Are you thinking like house, Ferris wheel, like down to like teddy bear? Like how deep do you get as far as like
Okay.
I don't know, being a director?
Yeah. So I'm always trying to make it a collaborative project with my models, because often I have a vision or idea, and then once we start the photo shoot, we start to act things out and do different things, and then things happen. So I was actually doing a plein air painting the day that this was completely demolished, and I called up my friend Francois and said, "Can the girls model?"
Right.
He's like, "Okay." And what do you want them to
We just
bring?
found a set. We gotta use this set.
Yeah. And it's like, some of these places are kind of off limits to go to, so it's like you gotta quickly do things. And we did this photo shoot, and they were like, "Should we bring the teddy bear?" I was like, "Okay." So the teddy bear has like been making the teddy bear has been making its way through time. So you can see she's a little girl here, and she's now a young lady here, and she's just about to graduate from high school. But this photo shoot took place the same day that this one did, because there was this abandoned house, and I was like, ooh, that would be great. The sun was starting to go down, you can see how they're illuminated. The sun has gone down, and I'm like, I still got you with me. Let's quick go over to this site. We'll do some photos here. And then, so it's almost like you can see that there seems to be this narration, like this happened, and then this happened. But in terms of the way that the painting and the way that the photo shoot was orchestrated, it's just the opposite. So it's almost like you get to play with time.
Yeah. So that brings me back. I remember what my question was. So, like, as a director, of these things, like, different artists work different ways. Like, I will work with, like, I'm going to do 10, and it'll be, like, in this compartmentalized series. Do you see these as being, like, grouped, like this would be a group, or do you see them as, like, this giant, you know, like, they're all part of the same world where they're, you know, they're archetypes, you know, is it one big thing, or is it, like, do they group off into smaller batches of...
I think that they can do both. Like, I think often I'm continuing to work with this series here. She went to high school, she went to college, and she became one of my art students. She's now graduated, and she's married, and so, like, I want to do a painting of her in her wedding dress at some point. Obviously, it takes so long to make these paintings that, like, I'm backlogged 5 to 7 years in terms of, like, what's happening. And then I kind of want to see what happens with Pascal, the younger sister. So, trying to figure out just a documentation of her life.
So this is bigger. It's
Yeah.
Like a big,
So this is like this is a bigger, more like they are archetypal figures in this world that we're following. But there's other things that happen where it's like, this is going to be like a one-time thing. This will just be this particular painting, and so that kind of goes back and forth. There's one more element to this here, in that we have almost like a patriotic scene, and at the same time she is a dual citizen in terms of being a United States citizen and as well as of French descent. And so like red, white, and blue works for both the United States and for France. And this one is called Joyland, State of the Nation. In terms of titling things, sometimes I will come up with titles from books, and there's a Stephen King book called Joyland, and then I used the band New Order. They have a song called State of the Nation, and so I kind of combined those two. But this is right after, we'll say, President number 45 was elected, and so you can see that I feel that things are kind of run down. It looks like it's a merry-go-round. It's supposed to be a lot of fun, but you can see she's not very happy with it. So.
Okay.
So this is Rochelle, who we've seen in some of the other paintings, and there was this raft that's very near where all that destruction that we've seen her in the other painting, and obviously the season has changed. This is summer. In this one, she is looking at the raft, and all that you can't leave behind, it's a U2 song. So anyway, she's looking out at the raft. We are the raft. We don't know what's on his mind, what he's thinking, but he's in this very stoic pose. And then in this one, it's hard to see, but the raft is still there. And she's looking longingly back at the raft. We don't know what he's thinking. And then we get to this one here. And if you ever get a chance to go to the Louvre, you're going to go see the Mona Lisa. But there's one of my favorite paintings, which is right behind the wall where the Mona Lisa is. It's a painting by Titian. And they are taking the dead Christ off the cross. And I totally stole that pose for this. Yeah. And so her legs are dangling there. We don't know if she's going to be okay. We don't know if she's done something to her. He's like looking off camera, trying to possibly look for help or figure out what he should be doing. And so I love this whole series, and I've always loved how the Titian, the legs just dangle there, and then the spine. So these are like some
homages or
yeah. So I'm always having that dialogue with artists.
So some of these are like the titles are definitely like Omaha Beach and Utah Beach. They're very much like I feel like some of the figured work, like we talked about, like archetypes. They're more they're timeless, right? But these are actual places. They aren't some conceptual space or some environment. Do you want to talk about like the significance between these actual places and even like the insets of items?
Thanks. I think it's great to bring that up, Andy. In terms of before the figurative work, I was doing landscape for years and years and years, and eventually I wanted to tell stories. And I think my landscapes started to try to tell the story. So I would make a painting, and then I would take a found object. So this is a rock from Omaha Beach. It witnessed D-Day, possibly, in terms of, I don't know how long this rock has been there. And I'm trying to tell stories with the objects that are there. This one here has this precious little vial of sand, and I'm painting them in black and white because as a kid, all the World War II footage I would see was black and white, and I wanted it to be kind of almost memorialized as opposed to like bright, brilliant colors. It's amazing how beautiful these places are, but at the same time, I'm trying to show reverence and trying to kind of almost like make them monuments in terms of what actually happened at that time and that place. And I think, go ahead.
No, it's so interesting that you say that, because like I had never thought about that, but black and white photography, it has a particular time associated with it, but like these are also like, like if you consider carved out of stone or something, you know, like, it has that value range, it has that reference, or, you know, like a lot of the Greco-Roman sculptures that were painted, they actually feel kind of gaudy whenever you see how they were actually painted. These have like that seriousness to them.
Yeah, there's a reference, and I think the fact that they, like I felt like this was such a good jumping off point. So I was doing all these paintings that had these frames that I would make, and sometimes I would actually carve into the frames little designs and things for other landscapes that meant something to me, and then I was able to make that the jump off point to the figurative stuff. And I think these particular landscapes, as I mentioned, I've made tons of landscapes over my career, but these are more moody. I think they fit in with the seriousness of the figurative work, and I didn't include any really bright, cheery paintings. Every single one in this exhibition has an edge, and I think they really tie all of the things together.
It's a thread that's consistent through the whole show, which I think is fantastic. Great. What's the span of this work like?
The span is 20 years.
20.
There's a painting that's called Sentinel with the 2 trees in the big sky. That was done in 2000.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, okay.
like this particular painting here, and you don't have to. You want to read?
Sure. Why not? I want.
Okay. All right.
It
So-
might be.
One thing that I found is really good is like all the stuff that doesn't get documented about artists talking about their work. There's so many artists I'm interested in, and I can't find anything of it, so I can't speak away.
All right.
I'd say that one's one of my favorites.
This one or this one?
The Apprentice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the model in that one?
I don't know the guy.
Okay.
So I'll tell you about these 3 paintings in particular. I have a fascination with dead things, and so one time, this is an artist friend of mine, and he now lives in Toronto, and he had several exhibitions in Cincinnati where he would do this taxidermy and almost manufacture new breeds of animal. He was almost making these Frankenstein.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, and on a Halloween at the Art Academy, he had a dissection, and it was sort of a Victorian dissection. So he's
actually doing it live.
Yes, he's doing it live on Halloween, and then his apprentice was bringing around some of the things, and so this is like a black swan, and the guy's got the handlebar mustache. He looks like he's right out of a steampunk movie. And with this particular painting, my mother had some friends that they had this huge collection of butterflies, and I still haven't done this painting, but I posed my wife with all these butterflies, and I had her laying on the carpet, and I would put all these butterflies, and I'd take pictures, and so it was going to be like her in this whole giant sky with all these butterflies. And we turn the corner, and I see a bear skull. It's like, forget butterflies, I'm going for the bear. And how often do you get to see a bear skull? So I like the darkness, the moodiness of this. They remind me of Caravaggio paintings with the chiaroscuro. And in terms of some of my favorite painters are all from the Baroque period, so that really is
That's a really good reference, because I was thinking that with that down angle where you can see through the landscape behind these monumental figures. Yeah, I was thinking Baroque as well.
Is there a certain reason why you make frames for some and not others?
That's a good question.
Yeah, sometimes. Well,
That's a lot of work to make a frame, I'll tell you that.
So I stopped making frames for paintings mostly, especially these here, because some of them became so elaborate that they really started to take almost as much time as making the actual painting. In the painting, The Demise of the Buffalo, I actually learned how to weld railroad ties or spikes from the back of my painting. So when you look at that particular painting, it looks like these railroad spikes are mysteriously just hovering there. And I learned when I was at Yellowstone that at one point there were only 23 buffalo left because they were shooting them from the train and sending the furs back east.
Right.
So